Wherever we look, our world is facing a huge range of unprecedented challenges. So if you're a leader right now, how do you navigate your way through this? How do you make decisions in the teeth of so much uncertainty? How are you going to reconnect your people and rebuild your team so that they're fit to face the future? And what does it even mean to be a leader in such an increasingly challenging world? These and other questions I've been putting to top business leaders from across Europe, and I've had some surprisingly candid responses. So why don't you join me, Nisha Pillay, for the latest episode brought to you by Sherpany of The Agenda. My guest today believes that one of the key challenges for a leader is to stay focused, come what may. Pascal Niquille is the former CEO of the Zuger Kantonalbank in Switzerland, and there he completely changed the focus of the bank, but it was a long slog. Shall we find out why? Well, here he is. Welcome, Pascal. Good to have you with us on The Agenda.
Hi, Nisha. I'm glad to be here.
Pascal, when we last spoke, you said that what's most important for leaders is to avoid distractions. Why does that matter to you so much?
Well, Zug is a great place. When I joined Zuger Kantonalbank in 2009, it was the typical small Swiss retail bank focusing on mortgages, but had no wealth management at all. But as I said, Zug is a great place, many wealthy people, very international. So it was obvious to me that this was the way to go. And I needed to get the bank focused on really this way, which was completely new for everybody.
So where were the distractions? It sounds like you had a great strategy.
Well, as I said, there was absolutely nothing regarding wealth management. So we had to bring in the know-how, which means we had to bring in people. We had to build up the structures. We had to really get the bank into wealth management. And wealth management is banking, but is a separate way of banking. People doing mortgages, doing the retail business, are not wealth managers. So it changes culture a lot if you bring in such a new business.
For instance, how does it change the culture? What do you have to create?
Well, it's the way people think. Mortgage people bring something to the clients. We give them money so they can buy their houses. Wealth management is different. In wealth management, you, the client, brings us the money, so we look for it. And so the kind of people you need to do this business are different, completely different. A wealth manager doesn't dare to ask as many questions as somebody working with mortgages, because the wealth manager wants you to bring your money. So he's much kinder with the client than when you ask for a mortgage, then I give you the money. So I don't need to be as kind as a wealth manager. I want to know who you are. I want to know what you do with your money, with my money.
So did you have to bring in a whole different breed of person into the organization? Or were you able to somehow change the mortgage-focused staff into this different breed, this kinder banker that you've just described?
You can't change these people. There is a reason why they choose this type of business within banking. I mean, there is a reason you become a mortgage banker. It's the type of person you are. So you can't change a mortgage banker into a wealth manager. That's completely different. So we had to bring in new people with this specific know-how for wealth management. At the start, it was 10 people. So a group of 10 people we put together and made sure we had all the know-how and could start to build up a track record so we could show our people that we are in this business, our clients that we are in this business.
So you said it's very important not to get distracted when you're trying to create something new. How long did you think it would take to create this whole new area for Zuger Kantonalbank? And how long did it actually take in reality?
I was convinced that it would take about 3 to 5 years to get a track record, to get all the people ready and convince clients that they should work with us. Finally, it took us almost 10 years. And many reasons were coming from outside the bank, but distractions were also within the bank. I mean, to change culture, to bring in new business, it takes time for people to really accept that this is the right way to go.
It was obvious to you, Pascal, but was it obvious to the whole organization that this was the right course to be doing?
I mean, that's the hard thing to really convince your organization. And until you see really money pouring in, people don't believe you. And that's why it took so long. After 7 years, we really started seeing it in the financial figures that the business is coming.
So, in the period before it became evident that the money was pouring in and this business was going to work, who did you have to consult? Who were you able to share your thoughts with? Because presumably within the organization itself, everyone didn't necessarily agree with you.
I was working over the whole time with a personal coach, and that helped me a lot. Um, she is not coming from banking, so I mean the know-how I had myself, but what I needed is somebody who helped me find the right way to convince all my people that this is the way to go. And she is really an expert in how to find your way to convince your people and make them follow.
So, what did you learn from your coach who wasn't a banker?
Well, I learned that if you have an idea as a CEO and you're convinced that this is the right way to go, it doesn't mean that everybody else is believing the same thing you're convinced of, and that it takes time and efforts to convince them. And sometimes it's not even that they don't believe you; it's maybe just not in to their benefit to do what you want them to do. I mean, there are several reasons why they wouldn't follow, but um, it it's always the same. You need some people to start following, and then you get the organization slowly behind you.
Could you give us an example, Pascal, of how you changed the way you were communicating with your teams, with your bank staff, as a result of the intervention and advice of your coach?
Um, I I became much more personal, individual in my communication, and probably even more open. Um, in the beginning, I always thought it's so easy, it's so clear to see that you don't have to explain too much. And then I started to communicate more in detail. I started to write CEO letters, which I always wrote myself. Letters not too long, but long enough to have really details in there and explain it in words that everybody could understand. Um, I made meetings with employees in small groups, 10, 15 people, to explain what we wanted to do, why we wanted to do it. And this takes a lot of time, and I think the annoying thing for yourself is that you tell the same story again and again and again, and um, that's not really fun. But that's why I needed somebody to tell me that's the way to go.
And it made a difference.
It made a huge difference, yes. It made a huge difference in two ways. One is you explain it to people, but the other thing I think is also that people realize that you take time to make them understand. So
Ah.
you take off from your personal time for them.
Did your coach ever stop you from doing something? Stop you from making what could have been an error?
Oh, many times, yes. When I met her, I always had my plan, and the good thing was that we met. I explained her what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, and she started asking easy questions. But the easy questions are the nasty questions. And oftentimes she pointed to the little details I knew I hadn't really thought through it in detail, but I didn't really want to take the time to do it. And then we discussed it, found new ways, and found better ways.
Can you give us an example?
Well, generally, it was always, I was too fast. I always thought telling them once, explaining it once, it's enough. It's so easy to understand. They can understand. They're intelligent enough, and they can follow. But it's not a question of intelligence. It's a question of, yeah, taking time, giving time, and sometimes also give the opportunity to understand yourself.
So you're now a member of a number of boards, having moved on from Zuger Kantonalbank. You're chairman of one, the credit card issuer Viseka. You also have to have a good relationship with your CEO and your top management. Um, was that tested at all when you were working at Viseka and you moved into the chairmanship role at a time of big strategic change?
I was becoming president of the board in 2017. I came on the board in 2015, so I was 2 years just as a board member there. We had a good CEO, but a little earlier, the company had plans to make an IPO, and shareholders finally decided against it. And the CEO we had, he and the company as a whole was still on the IPO trip. So when I became president of the board, I really had to change the company from being on the IPO trip back on the strategy we set at that time. It was not possible to change the CEO, which I could understand, but so we had to find a new one. Really, a CEO who then could start from scratch with the new strategy and build up the company again.
Is there any advice that you give? Are there any learnings that you share with the CEOs you work with on the management boards that you sit on that come from your years of running Zuger Kantonalbank, 10 years as CEO of that after all?
Well, that's an interesting point because on the one side, you're always, well, as you have so much experience, you always think that you know in detail what they should do. And on the other hand, you should let them do it their way. So you need to find the way between setting strategy and letting them do it the way they want to do it. And probably just advise if they come and ask, but don't advise before they need your advice.
Pascal, you've told us about the importance of being prepared to change an organization and set a long term course. But many leaders don't really have the luxury of time in a very fast world, moving world with a lot of digital challenges, for instance. So, what would you say to them?
Have your long-term view. Not everything which happens today and you think is important is strategic. So be focused on your long-term view and try to separate daily needs and strategic needs. And this way you can really focus on a longer term.
Have you advised any of the CEOs that you now work with to have a coach from outside the industry?
Yes, that's something I tell everybody to work with a coach. Yeah, no, but you need to find your own coach. I mean, you need to find somebody you trust, and yeah, you're lucky if you find somebody.
How painful is that, though? How uncomfortable is that for you, though, as the leader of an organization, a successful person, to be constantly having this bit of grit, this reality check coming from the coach?
Well, as a CEO, as a leader, you tend to lose people who ask you the nasty questions. So it's even harder if you hire somebody and pay him or her to ask nasty questions and disturb what you are doing. And that's also why it really needs somebody you can trust, but he or she can trust you as well. That if he or she really asks the good questions and brings you back to reality, that it's not the last coaching session.
So, drawing the threads of our conversation together, then, Pascal, is there a final message you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Yes, I would sum it up in the way that if you want to change an organization, and change is always necessary, be patient. And it always takes more time than what you think and what you hope. Keep your freedom. Keep your freedom by probably controlling costs. Then board and shareholders will let you do your work. Don't lose reality, and there a coach helps. And last but really not least, keep your private life well organized. Then you have enough time to do your job.
Pascal, you say your private life should be organized, but how do you do that when you're the CEO and you've got to deliver on your targets, your board is breathing down your neck? It's easy to say, harder to deliver, no?
I think it's important that you stay trustworthy for your family. Um, Probably the most important thing I did over the last 10, 15 years is that I always planned my vacation 18 months in advance and I never changed any dates.
That's very funny. So that's your top tip to a young executive for a happy relationship. Stick to your holiday commitments. What advice would you give yourself, the younger Pascal Niquille, so that you would have been more prepared for leadership when you entered the CEO job at Zuger Kantonalbank?
Focus more at university on social sciences and really try to learn all the techniques how to get people behind you. That's finally, the most important thing you have as a leader, it's relatively easy to have good strategic ideas, but to make your people follow, that's the hard part.
Pascal Niquille, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us. On the agenda.